Have you ever looked in the mirror and seen your mom's eyes looking back at you, but with your dad's smile? It's kind of weird, right? You're this perfect mix of your parents, but at the same time, you're totally unique. That's one of the biggest and most personal questions in all of science. So today, let's crack the code of heredity together and figure out the rules that make us who we are.
So let's think about all of this as a giant puzzle. It's a puzzle that doesn't just explain why you look like your family, but it explains the incredible, beautiful diversity of all life on Earth. And the craziest part? You are holding a piece of that puzzle right inside your own body.
Okay, I want you to try something right now. Just reach up and feel your earlobe. Seriously, go ahead. Is the bottom part dangly and free, or is it attached all the way down the side of your head? This tiny little detail is a real inherited trait, a little clue passed down through your family tree.
So, which is it? Attached or free? It seems like such a small thing, but that little variation is a perfect window into one of life's greatest mysteries. How on earth are these traits actually passed down from one generation to the next?
And that right there gets to the heart of it. Reproduction is this incredible balance between things staying the same and things changing. On one hand, it passes on a reliable body plan. That's why people have human babies, not puppies. But it also sprinkles in these little changes, these variations. And it's those variations that make every single one of us completely unique.
For literally centuries, nobody could figure this out. But then, back in the 1800s, this humble monk named Gregor Mendel, just doing his thing in a quiet monastery garden, started some experiments that would change biology forever. He was about to crack the code. So what was Mendel's secret weapon? What made him so different? Well, lots of people had looked at inheritance before, but Mendel did something no one else had thought to do. He didn't just look, he counted. He brought math into the garden, meticulously keeping track of every single result. And when you picture this world-changing scientific breakthrough, you're probably imagining some high-tech lab, right? Nope. His lab was the monastery garden. And his test subjects weren't anything fancy, just ordinary pea plants that he picked because they had really simple, easy-to-spot traits. So here's his game plan. First, he took purebred tall plants and crossed them with purebred short plants. The babies from that cross he called the F1 generation. Then, he let those F1 plants grow up and pollinate themselves to create a second generation, the F2s. See? Super simple, really elegant. But the result was weird. In that first generation of plants, there were no medium-sized ones, no blend of the two parents. Nope. Every single plant was tall. It was like the trait for being short just completely vanished into thin air. But Mendel was a good scientist, and he had to ask, where did it go?
And this is where the counting paid off, big time. When that second generation, the F2s, grew up, the shortness trait was back. And as he counted and counted and counted, he found this ridiculously consistent pattern. For every one short plant, there were 3 tall ones. Not kind of close, not most of the time. A perfect 3-to-1 ratio.
This led him to a mind-blowing idea. He figured each plant must have 2 factors for height. The factor for tallness, let's call it big T, was dominant. You only needed 1 copy of it to be tall. But the factor for shortness, little t, was recessive. It was like it was being shy, only showing up if a plant had 2 copies of it, with no dominant one to boss it around. But Mendel, he wasn't done. He'd solved the puzzle for one trait, but now he had to raise the stakes. He started wondering, okay, what happens if I track 2 different traits at the same time? Like, what if I cross a plant that has round yellow seeds with one that has wrinkled green seeds? And the results were just fascinating. I mean, sure, he got the combinations he started with, the round yellow and the wrinkled green, but the really cool part? He started seeing brand new combos that he hadn't seen in the parent plants. He was getting round green peas and wrinkled yellow peas.
And this revealed another huge rule of the game. Getting the trait for round seeds had absolutely no effect on whether the seed would be yellow or green. The traits were being passed down totally independently. This became his second great law, the law of independent assortment.
Now, Mendel had figured out the rules of the game, but he had no clue how the game was being played. He didn't know what his factors actually were. It would take almost 100 years for science to catch up and find the physical blueprint of life that made all his rules make sense.
So,
Those mysterious factors Mendel talked about, we now know what they are. They're called genes. And a gene is basically just a specific section of your DNA that acts like a recipe, a set of instructions for building one specific protein.
Let's connect this back to those pea plants. Think of the height gene as a recipe for a protein, an enzyme that helps the plant grow. If the gene's recipe is for a super efficient enzyme, the plant makes tons of growth hormone and boom, it's tall. But if the recipe has a little tweak that makes the enzyme kind of lazy and less efficient, the plant makes less hormone and it stays short. That's it. That's how a gene becomes a trait you can actually see.
And this brings us right back to Mendel's brilliant idea about dominant and recessive traits. Just like the peas, we get one copy of every gene from our mom and one from our dad. The trait we end up with, what people see on the outside, all depends on the specific combination of those two copies we inherit. Now, these genes aren't just all tangled up like one lol piece of spaghetti. They're neatly packed into separate bundles of DNA called chromosomes. We humans have 23 pairs of them. And because genes for different things, like seed shape and seed color, are often on totally different chromosome pairs, they get shuffled up and sorted independently when eggs and sperm are made, which is exactly what Mendel predicted without ever seeing one. Okay, let's bring this home with a really clear human example that shows these rules in action. How sex is determined. It's a perfect, straightforward example of genetic inheritance. So, of our 23 pairs of chromosomes, 22 of them are pretty much matched sets. But that last pair, the 23rd pair, is special. These are the sex chromosomes. Females have a matched pair of two X chromosomes. Males, on the other hand, have a mismatched pair, one X and one much smaller Y chromosome. And here's how it plays out so simply. A mother has two X chromosomes, so she can only ever pass on an X to her child. That's all she's got to give. The father's sperm, however, can carry either an X or a Y. So if the child gets an X from dad, the combo is XX. It's a girl. If the child gets a Y from dad, the combo is XY. It's a boy. Simple as that. All right, so let's boil all this down. What are the big ideas to take away? First, reproduction creates both similarities and variations, and those get passed down. Second, traits can be dominant or recessive. Third, different traits are usually inherited independently. They don't stick together. And finally, for us humans, it's the combination of X and Y chromosomes that determines sex. So we've seen how a few simple rules, discovered by a monk in a garden, can explain so much about why we are the way we are, why we're so similar to our families. But that leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. If those simple rules explain our similarities, what do all the infinite, tiny variations that make each of us unique say about the future and the potential of all of us?